In the next chapter of this tutorial, I want to break down the automatic process into the several steps so that you know what's going on behind the scenes when you start that automatic process, and also maybe have a little bit more control over what's happening. So this is our new clip, and I found this really derelict room in that factory and thought it would be great to do some compositing with that. And you can see it's a rather smooth and steady shot in the beginning. We have a lot of features that we can track, so that shouldn't be too hard, but then all of a sudden the camera starts to get really shaky, and well, I thought we can composite maybe an earthquake or I don't know, an explosion or something like that. So I wanted to have a very shaky camera movement. And instead of just cutting that off so that we have the steady movement, I really want to keep these shaky motion blurred frames, but of course they will be really hard to track with just the automatic process. So what I want to do is I want to just start with the first 500 or 600 frames, do an automatic tracking with that, and then adding the rest of the frames later and then tracking them manually. So let's go back to SynthEyes and open up that shot by going to Command O and then go to the folder. And I've already exported that as an TGA image sequence. Open that up and let's set the end frame to 600, and of course we have to adjust the frame rate to NTSC and then just press OK. Okay, you can see it loading in the memory. But instead of using the summary panel here, I want to really break down that process into the several steps. And the first step with an automatic tracking is to calculate all the blips. So we can go to the feature panel here and then start that blips computing process by pressing that button, blips for all frames. So this looks a lot like the dialog that we had seen in the first automatic process. Alright, and when that is finished, you can see that your whole screen is now covered with tiny little dots, and these little blue and red dots are your features that SynthEyes has been able to track throughout your shot. Now the next step is to pick some of these features and turn them into trackers. And you can do that by pressing that peel button down here, and when you do that, you can then go ahead and pick a feature and click on that with your mouse, and by doing that you will turn that into a tracker. But not every feature is actually good enough to be a tracker, so you really should try to pick only the right ones. For example, let's zoom in here. You can see that we have some nice features on these corners of that window. And if you look at these, you can see that they are doing pretty much the same movement as all of the other features. So that tells us that they are probably doing a right and correct tracking. So by clicking on them, we can turn them into a tracker. And if we scrub through the shot now, you can see that it actually looks pretty good and also is a really long track. Whereas if you look at this one, for example, let me just turn that into a tracker quickly. You can see there is a spike in this trail, and the others don't have these spikes. And if we scrub through the shot, you can see that there suddenly the tracker is jumping away, and also it is very short. So I think it's just 3 or 4 frames. So we can just undo that by hitting Command Z and then trying to just pick the trackers that are doing a correct tracking. So let me choose the corner up here, and the reason for that is then we can later tell this window has been probably on this square that we now are building up by selecting these features here. Also maybe let's choose these ones, because then we know, okay, probably this black square has been in that place later when we have that 3D solution. So that way you can work your way through the shot and then pick some trackers that you think that make sense. Maybe also trying to define that corner here of that wall by just picking the trackers that are here on that edge. Also, we can define the outline of this hole by selecting these 3 or 4 features. And we could go on like this, but if you do it for the whole shot, then it can be, again, a little bit tedious and boring. So instead, we want to use an automatic process again, and that is to just select the Peel All button. And when you do that, then SynthEyes will select all the features for you that SynthEyes thinks are solid, that are in a good distribution, because it's also important that your whole frame is covered with features or with trackers in order for SynthEyes to create a good solution. And if you look at that and then find some places where you want to have a tracker and where SynthEyes didn't put one, then you can just go ahead and peel one manually, and thereby defining the geometry of your scene. Alright, now let's quickly jump away from the feature panel to have a look at these trackers. And it seems to me that most of them are pretty much doing a correct track.